Welcome, everybody. Hope we're all okay out there. It's another day. It's nice and sunny, which is what we always like. And more to the point, we have connection today with John Helm. So it's fantastic to have him on the show. We're all set up. He's upstairs in my clinic, and I'm downstairs in the gym. So we're all set. And if there's any problems, I'm sure I'll be up there to help him out if we need to. So first things first, as always, let's thank our sponsor today, which is me. AC Personal Training will go this time because I'm in the gym. So anybody can sponsor these events. We've definitely got two coming up. We've got hopefully a big one on Friday. We're still waiting for confirmation on that one. We're going to drop a little bit more of a hint on that. He was a England manager. That's your tip for this week, for today, and we'll hopefully get him involved on Friday. We are waiting for confirmation on that one though, as we speak. We've got, as always, Simply Video behind us, looking after us with our connections and things, making sure everything's okay, they've been brilliant all the way through. They are the English version of Zoom and far, far better. They'll love me for saying that. And also for the SGH Sporting events, as always, you can find all the information on there. You can find all our previous interview streams, out there. It's I know you're all back at work, a lot of back at work now, but you can pick these up at any point. You don't have to watch them with us at 12 o'clock. You can watch them, whenever you want to go back and watch any of them. So you can also go on there for the NHS. You can go on there and still donate. We are still raising money for them. They're still doing a fantastic job out there, so we can still go out there and put a quid, a 50p, 20p, whatever you can afford. Every penny will be going to the NHS as well, because they're more than anybody at this present moment in time, and all the other emergency services, but the NHS in particular is what we're raising money for. They've done a fantastic job through this pandemic, and they have been doing a fantastic job, for years and years, and will also be looking after us for years to come as well. And my nurses are out there. One of my nurses has got, she's been on the front line, and it's been very, very hard for us. So we know exactly what it is like out there. So first things first, let's go to our guest today. So first guest is AJ. AJ's in instead of Hurdy today. Hurd is sunning himself, I think, over in Whitby, looking at making sure one of his houses over there is all good and proper. AJ, how are you? Well, he's put himself on mute, so that's always a good sign, isn't it? We can't hear him. It's maybe not a bad thing sometimes.
Can you not hear me, Cuzzy?
Oh, we can hear you now, mate. We can hear you. We can hear you now.
Yeah, so I'm not sure I'm a guest. I'm just a capable stand-in for Hurdy, but I have to tell you, Hurdy rang me. He's gone to Whitby this morning to see he's got a place over there, and he's gone over with two of his kids and his missus, and there is currently World War III and IV going on in Whitby because famous last words as he was exiting his house in Horsforth. Liz, have you got the keys? Yes, I've got the keys. You get to Whitby.
He hasn't got the keys. Oh, that'd be a good journey back then, won't it?
So there is currently, he said, tell them on that show. She's honestly, that's what I have to deal with every day, this bloody woman. So there it is. So don't go to Whitby.
Well, I dread to think, I feel sorry for Liz at the minute because it would be a very quiet car on the way back for that one. As always, Clarky, how's things with you? Are you in the East Wing, North Wing, South Wing? What way in today?
Yeah, I'm in the East Wing. The mirror behind me reflects everything that I say. And, I was thinking of actually going over to Whitby today to check my eyes, but I'm not going to do that now. That's a good advice from AJ.
That's good.
But I'll probably end up going to Ripon instead.
Fantastic. Well, I'm going playing golf later on, so I've got a meeting after this, and then I'm going to go play golf later on with the head. We've had him on before, Don Bott. We've had him on before. I'm going to go play golf with him. And then we've also got I've got a big game next week though, Clarky. I'm playing Sharpie. I've got Lee Sharp next week. He's been having a go at me all week about he beat me last time. I'm like, I want my money back. So we've got a game with Sharpie next week as well. So
we can all name drop, because we can all name drop, mate.
I know we can, but he's a friend of the show, is he? And it's his birthday today. He's getting old. But let's go to our guest today. We tried to get him on last week. We had problems with Virgin last week, as I say. He's upstairs in my clinic now. So welcome, John Helm. How you doing?
I'm good, thanks. I'm glad to see you're on the treadmill in the gym and not me then, Andy. And hopefully the technology this week than last week. It wasn't me, it was Virgin, wasn't it?
It was, yes, it was. It was a bad connection. But on my computer, we might have a little lag on it, but it's not too bad. John, we're going to start right from the beginning, mate. Because I've interviewed you before, and I know you've got wealth of experience. But I want to start right at the very beginning, where it all started for you in journalism. That first day, the first job down at Shipley, and particularly you've got to tell us about your first article you did down there as well.
Okay, yeah. I even remember the date, Andy. August 17, 19th, which means I'm a pretty old boy, doesn't it, really? So I can remember all that way back 61 years ago. The first day, very keen, absolutely desperate to impress. Grabbed the phone when it rang, hello, and a voice said, hello, John. I said, hello. I was amazed that somebody knew I'd started there. He said, I've got a little story for you. I said, oh. He said, Councillor Sucksmith? I said, yeah, he said he dropped dead last night. I said, what, you joking? Oh, dearie me. So I shot into the editor, John Mitchell. I said, I've got some bad news, Mr. Mitchell. Councillor Sucksmith passed away last evening. Right, he said, well, you write the story, and when the paper comes out on Wednesday, the Shipley Times and Express, that will be your first ever article as a professional journalist. On the Wednesday, the paper arrived, and I rushed to grab it, of course, and there it was, front page, death of a local councillor by John Helm. Wow, and I felt really chuffed. I think it was nice to see my name in print. Anyway, the phone rang again that afternoon, about 3 o'clock. Hello, John. Councillor Sucksmith here. Never knew I was so popular. The poor old chap was very much alive, and it taught me a lesson straight off. Always check your facts.
Absolutely. Just a quick one, John. I know you're up there. I can come up there, but just tilt the screen towards you a little bit, so you're a bit more into the. So just pull it towards you. Pull the screen towards you a little bit if you can on the computer, just so we can see your whole face. We've only got half your face. That's it. Perfect. Spot on. So going back to
half
that, John.
Face is better than none.
It is with AJ. It is with AJ, but we're after you today, AJ. We're after today. John, looking at your whole career, obviously we're going to go into talking about the Olympics, all the sports you've done and everything else. But, you were down at Shipley, you did that. What was it about sport for you which got you hooked?
Being a tiny little lad, I was always kicking a ball. Apparently, my first teacher, Mrs. Dunwell, Sandals Road School, Baildon, said I used to dribble the tennis ball to school pretending to be Stanley Matthews, and my nickname is still Stan in parts of Baildon. People come up to me, hi, Stan, how are you doing? And I used to commentate while I was dribbling the ball. I used to commentate on matches in the schoolyard. I always wanted to be Len Hutton at cricket and Stanley Matthews at football. And at 8, I broke my leg. I also started wearing glasses, and I knew there weren't too many England centre forwards around wearing spectacles. So I thought, the next best thing would be to become a journalist. And then I started listening to the greats in my book, people like, you're far too young to remember, but John Arlott, the cricket commentator, a fellow called Raymond Glenn. And they became my heroes rather than players, which is a little bit strange, maybe. But sport, I was always bad on that. I was always at the back row at school. Instead of studying the science or the arts or whatever, I'd got my book into a football book or a cricket book and was doing little quizzes with some of the other lads.
And you went down to your big break really with BBC. You kind of got a call, didn't you, to go down to the BBC down in London. How did that come about? Going down into the big smoke, back in those days as well. It was, not the easiest decision to make, I wouldn't imagine.
No, I always said two big breaks, really. The first one was being around when Leeds United were the best team in Europe, and I was working at BBC Radio Leeds as sport editor. So I was everywhere with that great team. We could all name them, couldn't we, Howard? Sprake, Reedy, Cooper, Bremner, Charlton Hunter, Laurie McClark, Jones, Giles, Gray. And where on earth did you put Paul Madeley and Andy Couzens in that lot? So that was a massive break, working with that Leeds United team. And then I got the phone call of all phone calls. John, we'd like you to go to New Zealand to cover the Commonwealth Games in Christchurch on behalf of all 20 local radio stations. And I had an absolute Beano in Christchurch. Absolutely fell in love with I see Howard smiling as well. I suspect he loves the place. I absolutely fell in love with New Zealand. I'll say it myself, I had a great Commonwealth Games. I did 285 interviews with all the various stars of the time. There were people like Precious McKenzie, Jeff Capes, David Hemery, Alan Masco, people like that, for every local radio station in the country. And I even got to play cricket at Lanka Park, the test ground. We got a phone call that said, "You fancy a game of cricket?" Sorry about this Scottish accent. And yeah, we went to the game. Turned up on the Saturday. We were picked up. And I will get to the point, by the way, in a second, Andy. I looked up at the scoreboard and the opposition names were there. Stackpole, Chappell, Hadley, Redmond, Wadsworth. It was like the New Zealand test team. Our side included Anita Lonsborough. Now, it wasn't a fair game, really, I have to say. But we also had the wonderful commentator, Peter Jones, and a fellow called Bob Burrows, who's the head of sport. Anyway, we got thrashed and they drank us under the table as well. But at the end of that tour, this is the point of it, Cliff Morgan, head of Outside Broadcasts, invited me into London to the BBC on the Saturday afternoon show, which is now Sport on 5, of course. And he said, "We want you to come and work here full time." And, well, it was a no-brainer, to be honest. I've got a young family, but the prospect of working with Des Lynam, Christopher Martin Jenkins, John Arlott, and all these other people, well, how would you turn that down? I went and probably had the best 5 years of my life working down there.
And what's your highlights of that 5 years? Well, you know, obviously learning your trade of you're still going now. You're 77 now, and you know, still going strong, John, as well. You're still working as hard as ever. And you know, what did you learn, May, down there with the commentary side of it? I think because obviously being in radio is different to actually commentating at that point a little bit more with with the Olympics and everything else which comes with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I had that feeling that if you're working with these giants of broadcasting, you've got to be as good as they are, hopefully. And so you learn to try and never ever copy anybody, but you tried to be, as I say, as good as them and live up to their sort of standards. And it had to rub off. So as I say, I've already mentioned Cliff Morgan and Des Lynam, and I was working with absolute legends of the game, and you simply had to learn. And Howard will be interested in this. The other big break for me was that they said, golf, we want you to go and cover the golf championship, if that's okay. I said, no, I think that's okay. I can just about manage that. And in 75, I went to Carnoustie for my first Open Golf Championship. Tom Watson's first victory. He won it in the playoff with Jack Newton. And I was viewing the likes of Arnold Palmer and people like Bobby Locke, the first man ever to ask me for money for an interview, but he settled for a large Scotch instead. And Jack Nicklaus came towards me while I was live on the golf course at Turnberry during the 1977 Open, the best of the lot for me, the Watson-Nicklaus thing. And all of a sudden he turned around and came storming towards me, and I was terrified. Here is the Golden Bear coming towards me, coming to tear up. And he came to me and he said, "Are you RNA?" And I said, "No, I'm the BBC." And it was because he needed a ruling. His ball had stopped by a sprinkler head. And he wanted a ruling, but it absolutely terrified me. But here was I, little John Helm from Baildon, talking to the likes of Jack Nicklaus and Arnold Palmer and covering cup finals at Wembley. And I even got to work with John Arlott, and that's a good story in itself as well. So what did I learn? I learned to try, as I say, and live up to the great standards that the BBC had always set.
And you talk about the, Nicholas and things. Clark, you might have a question here as well. But were you kind of? Do you get, I suppose, starstruck? You sat there on the fairway, which Clark has also done this as well with the Sky. And you've got Jack Nicklaus coming across to you, Tom Watson coming across to you, these Arnold Palmer coming across. Do you get nervous, John, when you're doing that? Yes,
you do get awestruck, absolutely. No question about it. And There were some who were great, like Lee Trevino was absolutely fantastic. I interviewed him live during that Open at Turnberry on radio when he was bored because he was having to wait for Johnny Miller to find his ball up ahead. And you think, I'm talking to Lee Trevino. I'll never forget the interview. After about 2.5 minutes, I got the message, OK, he had to go and play the shot. He said, just tell him he's been listened to around the world and thank him for his interview. I said, thanks, Lee. Fantastic. We've had a great audience for that. And he just said, hello, Calcutta, India. Mind if I go and play my shot? The ball exactly where he said he was going to do. But you're right about being starstruck. And why not? You know, these were, in my mind, the greatest living sportsmen that I'd ever seen in my life. You know, it was the same whether it was cricket. And I'm sure, Howard, you must have felt it the first time you teed up, you know, with Sevi or whoever it was. You must have felt something like that.
Well, without a doubt. I was going to ask you something quite, you know, in particular. But, yeah, 74, 75 era was well before TV was every week. It was a once, maybe twice a year occasion. The Open Championship or the World Match Play Championship at Wentworth were on TV live. And maybe we saw the Masters a month behind on a video at our old golf club or whatever, like something like that. But what I wanted to ask really was, how difficult was it back in your day, you know, in the early times, when you had to commentate on different sports every different week? Because nowadays you get perfectly good commentators on every sport, but they're all assigned to their own sports. They don't go athletics 1 minute, football the next. Apart from Andrew Cotter, who we know is an absolute star. He is the next star. He can even do it with dogs, as he's shown on Instagram. And if you haven't seen his little video snippets of Olive and Mabel on YouTube or Instagram, go and have a look at them. They are hilarious. I mean, he's just got it off to a T. But he's a total pro. He's an all-round pro. He's a David Coleman, a Harry Carpenter, you name it. And he's obviously a John Helm. How difficult was it to learn about the new sports? Because you didn't see them every day on TV like we do now.
No. A very good question, Howard, actually. The only thing I would say is that cooperation was far greater, probably, in those early days. We knew, and everybody you approached was willing to chat to you and to help you out. And when you mentioned about the dogs, by the way, I remember I once went to Ellen Road Greyhound Stadium to do a commentary on a greyhound race there. And the race was over in about 29 seconds, and every dog was called something like the Maharaja of Baroda III. I got one letter saying stick to football. About right. And I've also done, by the way, pro celebrity mixed beach volleyball, which was desperately bad. The celebrities being Tessa Sanderson and Richard Dunn, and that was all, the whole weekend in Britain. You got it there, Howard, yeah. That got a massive viewership. But even last year, I got a phone call to go to the European Championships in Glasgow, and oh dear, synchronised swimming. And it's like Harry Gratian when he had to do jiu-jitsu or something at the Olympic Games. We do actually, Howard, still get thrown in occasionally to these odd sports if we do things like the Asian Games, which I do. I always do the things that begin with a B. So I do badminton, basketball, bowls and boxing. And I also do the canoeing and the rowing. But you're all probably lucky because you never get to hear that. But what I was saying was that in those early days, they were pioneering days. And that first Open I mentioned, and you will probably empathise with this, it went to that playoff on the Sunday. Of course, the Open used to finish on a Saturday in those days. Yeah. And it finished on the Sunday. Well, and if you remember my co-commentators, obviously Renton Laidlaw, who's an absolute dream. Tom Scott and what's the name of the other Scottish commentator? I was just going to say it as well. A very, very elderly Scottish gentleman. Don Mosey and John Fenton. And on the Saturday, the golf correspondent said, well, I'm taking my wife out on the boat tomorrow afternoon in Bournemouth. Don Mosey said, well, I'm speaking at Vale of Loon Rugby Club dinner. Chris Ray, he couldn't stay on either because he had a family party up in near Glen Eagles somewhere. Tom Scott refused to work on a Sunday, and that left me and Renton there for the whole day to cover the whole of the BBC radio and the odd bit for television. Well, absolutely incredible. Wow. Now, as you know, there's a cast of hundreds there, you know, but in those days there were 2 of us. That was it.
Yeah. And what is the most bizarrest
Percy Huggins it was, Howard.
Percy Huggins, yeah.
Well, what is the most strangest, you know, thing you've had to commentate on, John? You know, because I'm sure, I know you've said this before to me, that there's, and you just say it there's a wide range. What's the most bizarrest and the most work you've had to do to get that, and get the pronunciation right for all these people as well, and, you know, from different sports? What's the most difficult one you've had to do?
I would have said it was the canoeing, because I'll tell you why. I did the rowing at the '88 Seoul Olympics when Steve Redgrave won the gold medal alongside a guy called Andy Holmes, and I had an expert with me, but they didn't tell me. ITV's head of sport, John Bromley, you remember him, broke it to me the night before the games started. He said, "And Helmy, by the way, you're doing the rowing." I said, "Beg your pardon?" He said, "You're the rowing commentator." I said, "Since when?" He said, "Since now." And I was sent down to the River Han to commentate, did the rowing for 7 days, and I was reasonably comfortable with it. Then they said, "You have a day off, the canoeing starts, but go down to the river, take an ENG crew with, if anything happens, just do a little news report." So I go down there, and I'm just by the finishing post. The first canoeing race had started about an hour earlier or something like that. And I saw the ITV phone ringing, so I picked up the phone and said, "Hello," and I said, "Is that you, John?" I went, "Yeah." I said, "Oh, thank goodness, put your headphones on." I put my headphones on just as Barry Norman, the ITV presenter of the Olympic Games, said, "Well, now at long last, we can have some live action for you. For the first canoeing event of the day, we're going live to John Helm." What? There was no other person anywhere near me. There were no monitors switched on. There was no list of competitors, and the race was still 2 miles away. And I was on air for over 30 minutes without a note or anything. Now, if I said the water was blue and the sky was blue 25 times, that's probably an understatement. So that was the hardest thing. Plus, I didn't know him as a competitor. I saw a German vest come into view. I went absolutely berserk, and I actually came out with the phrase, "They're going like the clappers." I went, fortunately, very close back here. But that was tough. And the other tough one was at the Commonwealth Games in Glasgow, where, again, I got a late shout because the commentator lost his voice. And I had to get back from the rugby sevens, got to the boxing ring 5 minutes before the first bout of the day, and went live with no notes on that either, just the name of the fighters and the country and the weight division. Wow. And 33 fights later, I came off air. 33 fights with no notes. Not easy.
No, not at all, mate. Not at all. So you've gone from ITV. We talked a bit about BBC. So you came from BBC up to ITV. So you kind of came back home to take over the job for Martin Tyler, really, I suppose, from ITV. You know, how did that come about? And was that the big break again, to come home and look after all the clubs around and sport in and around Yorkshire a bit more?
Yeah, very much so. I'd never imagined I would leave the BBC, and there's only one reason you do. Let's be honest, what that is. And so I joined, and I have to thank Martin, because it was he who recommended me for the job. I loved it. I absolutely loved going to. First match ever was Rotherham versus Norwich, where the director missed the first Rotherham goal because he was still on a replay after Norwich had scored, and people still blame me for that. Still, John Helm missed the first ever goal. And the managers at that time were fantastic. You know, they really were great. Alan Clark was, of course, manager of Leeds in that first season. People like Ronnie Moore at Rotherham, George Kerr at Grimsby. And I got to the whole of that Leeds United team. And it was wonderful. It was different. And, of course, my co-commentator was Derek Dugan, former Wolverhampton Wanderers and all that. He was a lovely guy, but he was dyslexic. Which didn't help on the very first broadcast, where he grabbed me and he said, "You'll be okay, you'll be okay. You know, you might be nervous, you'll be okay." It was like a pneumatic drill at the side of me. I said, "I'm fine, Derek, I'm absolutely fine." And the opening titles went for the big match and said, "Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Derek Dugan. I'm the big match." Not the big match. And oh dear, loving guys to say, but not a gift to television, I'm afraid.
Absolutely. And you
also
mentioned
did TV golf. I mean, Howard remembered.
Well, yeah. Well, you did the golf. You did everything.
TV golf.
But looking at that time as well, John, you've come back up this way. You touched on it a little bit about the managers. How easy was it to get to the managers then and get the stories you needed, the teams before games? So you knew where you were going to maybe where it is now, where it's impossible to get anywhere near a manager as such.
Absolutely. It was a dream because I used to go round the clubs on a Friday often to do a bit of filming for Calendar Sport. I'd go to Barnsley and Danny Wilson and fish and chips with us. I'd go to Grimsby with George Kerr. I'd go to his house and he'd be hoovering and I'd be interviewing him doing that job. And they were so approachable and all the players were so approachable as well. It was a different era. It really was, where no fear involved. There was a rapport. I don't know when it all changed, really, but there was a real rapport between the managers and the players, and particularly the television media and radio. It's a shame it's gone, actually. Shame that's gone.
Yeah, I suppose the camaraderie then gets around. The other thing which we got to talk to you about at that point as well, John, because it's well known and it's just gone 35 years, and I know that you commentated. I was hired as well. We had Don Goodman on the other day as well, and Don was talking about the fire. We've got to ask you about your experience of the fire, down at Bradford, because it's something which is edged in a lot of people, and certainly in around Yorkshire. Their memories of that. For you being a commentator, how hard was that, and what's your recollection of it?
It was certainly the worst day of my life. Such a beautiful day as well. We'd had a nice meal down in the Victoria Hotel in Bradford before the kick-off. We were only there because Bradford City were being awarded the trophy. They'd won the league. And the game was meaningless. Lincoln City would have accepted that as well. I mean, whoever won, it didn't matter. Big crowd, carnival atmosphere. And then there was only about a minute to go to half-time. And it was actually me that spotted it, I think. If you remember, in those days, Andy, there was the small stand opposite the main stand. And I was on the hillside up above it in what was like a garden hut, to be honest with you. You climbed up to that from London Road. And I just spotted this small glow as we went in on, I think it was Stuart McCall taking a throw in. I pressed the lazy talkback key down to the director, Peter Jones, and said, "Can you give me a close-up shot in the stand?" And there was this small fire. Those were my words. There appears to be a small fire in the stand. And if only somebody put their foot on it, history would have been different. And the most staggering statistic to me, I found out later, it will have seemed eternity probably, but 4.5 minutes later, the whole of that stand had gone. Now that is an absolutely staggering statistic. My feeling at the time was to try and keep as calm as possible, probably to say as little as possible, because the pictures were so graphic and so horrendous that I just felt as though I should not over-dramatise, because I had no idea that all those people were dying at the back of the stand. No idea at all. I could only see what I could see with the people spilling out onto the pitch in front of me. And I was actually getting sick at the time as well by some young kids. To be fair, some of them apologised to me later. They just got caught up in the emotion of the occasion. Yeah,
I was there. I was actually in the Cup because I was supposed to be playing a game after. We were supposed to be playing a Cup final after. So, I totally see. You were the voice for, I suppose, all the parents out there, all the families out there who had, friends and family at the game. You had to relay that to people in their own homes, because that's the only way we could get to people. We couldn't get to anybody through the forms of what we've got now with mobile phones. And that must be quite hard for somebody, and must have thought about that as well at the same time.
Oh, very much so. And of course, I knew, being a Baildon boy and being a Bradford lad who'd watched so many matches at Valley Parade as well as at my beloved Park Avenue, I knew many of the people, and I went on quite a lot of hospital visits later as well. And of course, I was personal friends with the likes of Stuart McCall and Peter Jackson. So when I went down onto the ground, there was Jacko with his duffel coat around his claret and amber shirt, looking for Alison, his wife. I just you couldn't believe it. You just could not believe what you were seeing. And my worst moment came when two little lads scrambled up the hillside to me and shouted out that there were two dead down on the pitch. Now, that really sent a shudder through me. And I was eventually told I could stop talking. But yeah, knowing people there did make it worse. And I know you were there, Andy. Craig Brown was actually there as well, the Scotland manager. He was there watching a player. And you might not know this, Howard, as well, but Ewan Murray was a friend of a lad called Mick Farrer. And he'd gone to the game with us. It's amazing who was there. I thought my own son was there. And I had a story. So but I had to concentrate really on the in hand. And I was grateful, I think, at that time for all the years I'd had in journalism, because you would hate somebody who had no experience to be thrust into that situation.
Absolutely. Let's just move on just a little bit further. I know we've, World Cups. You've done 1982. I know you work for FIFA now as well. So you do a lot of things for FIFA and also for the World Cup. What's your the best recollection of the World Cups in those from 82 right through to when you're still doing them now? Yeah.
Not correcting you, but my first World Cup of all was 78 in Argentina, but that was for BBC Radio. 82, Spain was for me the best. I loved it, and the best game I've ever commentated in my life, Italy versus Brazil, that I could have broken into tears. I'd fallen in love with that Brazilian side, with Zico and Socrates and Fano, although Big Jack Charlton used some Psycho and Socrates, as well as Pelé instead of Pelé. But they were a wonderful team, and they got destroyed by a Paolo Rossi hat-trick. But Spain was a wonderful World Cup for me. And then all the remaining ones, you're laughing at Big Jack, were, USA. They were all different. They all had a different flavour. Germany was fantastic. 26 matches. Just travelling by train in Germany all over the place. I think I did about 8 of the stadiums. And there's a different flavour to every one. South Africa was different to Brazil. So, and I've commentated on 6 finals, the actual final in the finals, which is fantastic. If you're looking for a peak of a career as a football commentator, you would have to say to commentate on a World Cup final. And I've done half a dozen. So, I'm quite proud of that. But every experience has been wonderful, right back to 78, where I went to the draw in the January, and there were 4 of us there. I went to the draw in Russia 2 years ago, and there were 840 there just at the draw. And that's how things have changed again.
And you say the World Cups which you've done and the finals which you've done. Do you, as a commentator, do you have in your head that there's however many millions watching this? Do you have that, or do you just think there's one person in front of you? How do you cope with the thought process of there's so many people watching this World Cup final?
Yeah, very, very good question, actually. For me, it's the one person it's like me talking to you now. I think if you thought there's 30 billion out there, I do commentate a lot, as you know, in India. And the regular audience we have for a match there is 30 million regularly for Kolkata versus Goa. Now, people can't comprehend that, and you can't really. It wouldn't do you any good to think, wow, all those people listening to every word, and we're never going to make mistakes from time to time. But I used to like more as a commentator, because I think there was that intimacy there where you felt very at home, very comfortable listening to that commentator. It's like Howard said about Andrew Cotter. There are certain people you feel very comfortable in their presence because they know this, and it's just a pleasure to be part of it and to listen to them.
And also, not just World Cups you've done Olympics as well. Now, we go back to a little bit which you talked about earlier on about names and things. That must be, doing ice skating and things like that in the Olympics is going to be a hard thing for you to do. What's your recollection of the Olympics, which you've done?
It's a funny thing. I'll go on to that in a second. You just mentioned ice skating. Believe it or not, I did do ice skating for ITV. And this is funny. I have to tell you this story. It was the year after Torvill and Dean, and our 2 were Barbara and Slater. Barbara Slater, Karen Barber, Nikki Slater. And nice. And I had to interview them 3 days before it started in the World Championships in Tokyo. And I said, how do you think you're going to do? This is about the names, by the way. They said, we'll finish 6th. You'll finish 6th. That's a bit specific, isn't it? No. Torvill and Dean have won it the last 2 times. So Bestimanova and Bukin of Russia are the next best 2. It's their turn to win it, and they are the best. After them, it's Ponomarenko and Mareva, also of Russia. but the judges don't want Russia 1 and 2. So Wilson and McCall of Canada will be placed second in the silver medal position, and Ponomarenko and Mareva will get the bronze. Fourth are Engi and Toth of Hungary, because they've agreed to skate at everybody's gala this year. Fifth, the Duchesne is in France, technically not very good, but the flamboyant, the fans love them, and we'll be sixth. And that was exactly how it finished, from 1 to 6. And they said it was basically about right back, and still remember all those names. So you work really hard at getting those names right. And at the Olympic Games, you're absolutely right, because I actually did a basketball match between Armenia and Qatar. Now, that is a nightmare. Also, if you've got South Korea versus North Korea, and everybody's called Park or Kim or Lee, those are absolute nightmares, but at least they're easy names. And I once did Man United versus Thailand, where the Thailand number 4 was called Sanaya Surya Jatara Patarapong. He never got the ball, but I never got the but yeah, at the Olympics, it is hard, and that's why this is, when you asked me earlier about the research, when I did the canoeing and the rowing at the London Olympics, I spent 8 hours every day going through every name of every rower in every boat from every country on computers, which we didn't have in the old days, did we, Howard? And so that's the amount of research you have to do. I had to know that the number 3, the bow in the Canadian boat, was called Dermot McLaglen. And the Korean boat, the cox, was called Kim Nam Wan. And it's tough. It is tough, and people don't realise. I do 6, 7, 8 hours research on every game.
And this comes to the next part. I don't know if AJ might have had this for a question for you, but I'm gonna throw it in now.
It's a quiz question actually.
With the photographic memory side of things, obviously you've got a photographic memory. We're going to go to that, John, in a bit. You know exactly what I'm talking about, I think. We'll go to that in a little bit. Talk about a bit about what you're doing now, John. I know that you work for FIFA, and we had Russell on, your mate, and I do apologise to your wife and everybody else who's out there that we gave away your Indian golfing tour for both of you, and work, but what's it like out in India? What's it like out there doing everything out there for, I think Russell was saying it's 6 months of the year pretty much, and we're still working for FIFA and doing all the things for them as well. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing fully for yourself now, mate. Okay,
well, for the first time in my life, I've nothing in the diary, not even a haircut. I'm desperate. I know you've got a secret you can help me out. But most years, and last year, for example, what I did the Under-20 World Cup in Poland, which lasted for a month for FIFA. I did the Under-17 World Cup in Brazil. That was another month in Brasilia. I did 2 weeks in Korea doing the East Asian Championships for a firm called Dentsu. That's where I have to do North Korea versus South Korea.
Nice.
And I did 2 months in India doing the Hero Indian Super League, which Russell and myself really enjoy. We have our frustrations, but it is fantastic. I think, Howard, you have probably played golf in India. I know, Andy, you've heard the golfing stories.
Never.
Yeah.
But the quality of... You what, Howard?
No, sorry, I've never been to India, but it's only just been, instated on the European tour the last few years after my time. So thankfully, but I love the stories and all the food and stuff. But it's something I missed out on.
The golf courses are excellent, by the way. They really are. Yeah. Not all of them. There are some dodgy ones, but some of the courses are really good. But the football, you were asking me, is really entertaining. The average is 3 goals a game. It's played in 10 different cities, and the standard has improved year by year. We've had 6 years of the Hero Indian Super League now, and at one time they used to have the old stars playing there, like Roberto Carlos and Robert Pires, Nicholas Anelka, Del Piero. Now you've not heard as much of the foreign players. They still have plenty going, but the locals have improved so much. The Indian players have come on in leaps and bounds, and the crowds can be fantastic. The average crowd in Kerala, 65,000. Wow. When you have the Calcutta Derby, it's 120,000. just to watch Mohun Bagan against East Bengal. The people are lovely. The team's staying very, very smart hotels, so you wouldn't have to worry about the food, Howard. I assure you, the food is terrific and really nice. And the people are adorable. Honestly, I said this to somebody this week. I feel very humble when I go to India. It is like the Marigold Hotel in many ways, but the people are just so accepting. The little children, you see, they've got the smiles on their faces all the time. There's nothing. They play with a little pebble or a bottle of water or whatever. And whether it's cricket or football, they love their sport there. And they're just nice, nice people. It's a real experience.
If I can the players that I've met on the European tour, Jeev Milkha Singh and all his friends, they are just absolute gentlemen. They have their own traits and so on, but their manners are impeccable.
Very much so, and it's the same with the football. I've been to 2 or 3 matches in Mumbai recently, and the players come to speak to you. The Indian players actually come to speak to you. The managers remember you from years ago. They always ask how is the family. They'll wave to you when they score a goal. They are just naturally pleasant people, nice people, humble people, and good people. I can't hear a false word about them.
Fantastic. John, we could speak forever, as always. We've kind of flown through quite a lot of stuff there. We always do a quiz, and we always do some questions from Facebook as well, which Hurd normally comes in and do. We've got AJ down here. AJ, I'm going to leave this over to you, mate, so I'm going to let you go through this step, and I'll come back in again with a couple more questions at the end, John. So, over to you, AJ.
Okay, thanks. John, thanks for coming on the show. It's brilliant to see you. John, not everybody knows, but you are a Guinness Book of Records world holder. Is that correct?
Sad, isn't it? Very sad, but nobody's ever taken me on.
It's amazing. So yesterday we see Howard's Ryder Cup, and then today we've got a Guinness Book of World Records. It's incredible. And it was apparently, this is a quiz that Hurdy has written, and he said, let's have an attempt at replicating that world record. First question then is, can you name the 92 teams of the Football League? And your time starts.
Well, what year was it? What year was it, John? What year was it when you did this?
1981-2 season. My first year at Yorkshire Television, 1981-82.
And it's also, just tell the viewers who are watching and the lads that the reason this came about as well, because there's a story behind how it came about.
Yes, I mean, it came about because we were doing a program called Brain of Sport against these, well, I dare call them anoraks now. And they knew absolutely everything, including the name of a timekeeper from a 1920 lightweight boxing match in Stevenage, And when it came to me, what had happened was we had to sit a quiz at the BBC in London. Can you imagine this with all the great, Jim Rosenthal's and Alan Parry's and Des Lynam's and all these people? Anyway, Des Lynam, Chris Martin Jenkins and myself won the first 3 places to take part against these people in Brain of Sport. And so when it came to Peter Jones, the question mark, I said, Jonesy, just for the first question, just ask me to name all the teams in the County Cricket Championship. This is 1981-82, before Durham came in, but that was easier. That was Derbyshire, Durham, Essex, Glamorgan, Gloucestershire, Hampshire, Kent, Lancashire, Leicester, Middlesex, North, that's not Somerset, Surrey, Silvis, Warwickshire, Worcestershire, Yorkshire. Oh, right, he said, well, that's of course. He said, well, the second question's a little bit tougher. Can you name all the 36 teams in the Rugby League? I said, well, that's reasonably easy. That's Barrow, Backley, Blackpool, Bradford, Bramley, Cardiff, Carlisle, Castleford, Chorley, Dewsbury, Doncaster, Featherstone, Fulham, Halifax, Huddersfield, Hull, Kingston, Rolls, Hounslow, Hatton, Keighley, Leeds, Nottingham, Oldham, Rochdale, Lancaster, Salford, Sheffield, Swinton, Trafford, Wakefield, Warrington, Whitegate, Wakington, and York. It took about another 12 seconds. This is the bit that you want now, isn't it, you see? So there's a good story to go after it, by the way. 92 clubs. 1981-82, so no Rushden and Dines and no Forest Green Rovers in those days. But the league at that time was Arsenal, Aston Villa, Birmingham, Brighton, Coventry, Ipswich, Leeds, Liverpool, Man City, Man United, Middlesbrough, Nottingham Forest, Notts County, Southampton, Stoke, Sunderland, Swansea, Tottenham, West Brom, Wolves, Barnsley, Baton, Bolton, Cambridge, Cardiff, Charlton, Chelsea, Crystal Palace, Derby, Grimsby, Leicester, Luton, Newcastle, Norwich, Oldham, Murray, Sheffield, Wrexham, Brentford, Mississippi, Bristol Rovers, Burnley, Cardiff, Chester, Chesterfield, Amsterdam, Fulham, Chilling, Huddersfield, Lincoln, Millwall, Newport, Oxford, Portsmouth, Preston, Reading, Southend, Swindon, Walsall, Wimbledon, Accrington, Aldershot, Barnet, Blackpool, Bournemouth, Bradford, Bury, Cogs, Crewe, Down, Halifax, Hartlepool, Hereford, Macclesfield, Norwich, Peterborough, Bourville, Watford, Scarborough, Scunthorpe, Cheltenham, Wickham, and York.
Brilliant.
It was. They got Norris McWhirter up, if you remember him, to Yorkshire Television, so he recorded it, and they made sure that I hadn't missed anybody. I didn't miss anybody there, did I?
No. I was ticking them off as they went through.
What it did do, chaps, it got me onto. It was funny. The phone rang at home, and I was in another room, and my wife answered it. And the voice said, "Hello, it's David Frosty. We'd like John to come on Guinness Book of Records." And she said, "Piss off." It was sorry about the language. But, so I went on a show. I went on a show with Paul McCartney, Sir Paul McCartney, who'd sold the most records, Billie Jean King, who'd won the most Wimbledon titles for women, the world's fastest cucumber slicer. Now, that was I couldn't miss that one. The guy who played Dracula the most times, and a woman who'd fallen the furthest out of a plane and lived. She was an air hostess who fell 36,000 feet in a plane crash and landed in the branches of a tree. And she was beautiful. She was really gorgeous. You know. Wouldn't mind meeting her again. You know. 36,000 foot fall. So it got me on the show like that as well. But nobody's ever taken me on, which I can't understand.
And the record is, John? I think is it 26 seconds?
26 seconds.
26.
Unbelievable. AJ, back over to you, mate.
Brilliant. Well, on that basis, so what we're trying to do, John, is find somebody who can knock Goffey off the top of this leaderboard. We've been trying to get somebody for the last 5 weeks. We are pinning our hopes exclusively on you. You're a Belden boy, so effectively there's going to be some of these questions around Belden and the local area that you're in. So, question number one: Belden Golf Club. Belden Golf Club was founded in what year? 1896, 1897, or 1898?
Oh, I should remember when they had the centenary. I will go with 1897.
Oh, John.
I think it's 86, isn't it?
It's 86. It's 86.
So we're doing this together. It's about Belden. We're doing this together.
I wasn't playing there that year.
I
had a membership somewhere else.
Okay, so Rita, Sue and Bob was filmed when? 88, 87, or 86?
Oh, dear. You're getting me on dates, aren't you? 86.
Bob on. Perfect. What year, who won the Open Championship in 1995?
It's a tough one, that.
I'll go Ernie Els.
He's a friend of the show, and Hurdy manages him, if that helps. And he's American.
Likes a JD and Coke.
Yeah, he likes it. It was actually John Daly. It was John Daly. Yeah.
Shy man. Very shy man.
Yeah, very shy. Have you ever interviewed John?
Yes, I have. Yes, a long way back. Yeah. He was more soberly dressed than me at that time.
Salt's Mill was a working factory which produced what?
It was a wool mill. It was alpaca goat. It was from the alpaca goat, so a woolen fleece.
Absolutely. Brilliant. Okay. What is Yorkshire's anthem?
Illy, Moor, Bartat.
Perfect. And actually, we'll give it a two-part question. What's the opening line of the song? And if you can sing it, even better.
Where hast thou been since I saw thee on hill claim or buttert? Where hast thou been since I saw thee? Where hast thou been since I saw thee? Is that enough?
Yeah, no matter wherever you go in the world, there's always some drunken bums singing that, and it's a remarkable song.
Sometimes in Guiseley.
Yeah.
So we haven't quite beaten Goffey. You let us down with the Belden one, which is a bit of a shame. But we're going to give you a bonus question. What year did Frank Bruno win his heavyweight title, and from whom?
Oh, tough. Dear. I told you I know nothing about boxing. 1985.
No, it was 1995.
There you go. No, nothing about it. Give it to Goffey. Give it to Goffey. He needs
that saddens us all here. Just, John, there's a few questions coming from social media. Brian asks, is there a sports event that you wish you could have commentated on?
Yeah, well, Howard will really empathise with this. The Masters. I think the Masters is one of the greatest sporting events. I've seen Rory McIlroy has said yesterday, that he doesn't think that the Ryder Cup will take place this year, but they are still on about holding the Masters. It's the one real truly great event that every year when I switch on the television, I go, I wish I was there. I really would love to commentate this. Never been. No, Howard. No, I've never been. As you know, I've done tournaments, particularly around Europe and South Africa, and I've never been to. I've done a couple of Ryder Cups, but not in America. I did them in this country, but never ever had the privilege of going to the Masters. One of my favourites there was a chap called Andrew Croker, who was one of Ted Croker, former secretary of the Football Association. After the Masters one year, he was over there and had the opportunity to play in a press day, following day, I think, and he got a hole-in-one at Augusta.
Wow.
And you retire on that, don't you?
Wow. Yeah.
How many times did you play, Howard?
I played the once.
Yeah? And what's your abiding memory?
Well, my abiding memory of the tournament was how amazing it was and how much I was looking forward to going back for my second time, but I never made it. But I did commentate for the BBC, and I wish you'd have taken my place because I was alongside Peter Alice and Alex Hay. And strange thing about starting that commentary that week, Alex Hay said, he says, Howard, he says, come outside. He says, I just want a couple of words, he says, about the commentary. I said, oh, yeah, so, okay, anything I can learn, that'd be fantastic. And he said, look, he says, you don't know how this works, do you? I said, no, I don't. I'm really, looking for any advice I can get. And I'd asked all over the place, and nobody was willing to give away any secrets. And Alex said, he says, well, look, he says, follow this simple rule. He says, there's a swipe that comes across the screen. He says, where the hole that one player is playing switches to another one. He says, that's usually when the commentator changes. He says, in a two, he says, if it swipes and I'm commentating, you will pick up on the next shot. If it swipes when you're commentating, I will pick up on the next shot. He says, that's as simple as it gets. He says, listen to the ears, all the instructions, and my goodness, there were so many voices in my ears, I couldn't believe it, more than normal. And it was quite difficult, very difficult, looking at a monitor just to commentate on golf. I couldn't feel the golf. I couldn't actually really feel it at all. So it was very difficult. That's the best bit of advice. The only other bit of advice I ever got from anybody was Peter Alice, and he said that you ought to picture yourself as an actor. He says, if you can picture yourself as an actor and you're acting to your public, and they want something fantastic to come out of your mouth. He says, it won't happen all the time. He says, but just that one little snippet will come out every now and again. And says, that'll be worth the 5 or 6 hours that you've done in commentary. He says, but be an actor, excite people. And I don't think I managed it.
I think that's great. I'm sure you did. I think that was great. Funny last week, and I referred to that fact. I hate this behind closed doors business at the moment because I'm a believer that performers need an audience, just as an audience needs a performer. And I said that we are performers in a way. We might not realise it, but we are. People are listening to us. And that was very good advice from Peter. I also say just to be yourself, because there is everybody has their own personality. Don't try and copy. You can seek to emulate, but not to copy. Anything about, isn't it, Howard? There's no question. I mean, the behind closed doors thing interests me. I'll never forget talking to you once. I think you will agree. I tried to observe the rule that you were at your office when you were playing. So even though I knew you, I would never, ever speak to you, never do that. But you were playing in the Belgian Open once, and there wasn't a soul on the course, not one person. And you turned around to me and you said, my God, it's so quiet, I can't stand it. Because there was nobody there, so there was no crowd for you to perform to.
You could probably hear more.
Which is a very strange one at the minute, John, with what's going on with the football. You know, I don't know if you've seen any of the... We talked about it before on here with the Bundesliga and things like that. You know, is it strange for you to see that? Is it going to be strange for the commentators to be commentating on things like that as well, with no crowds being around at this present moment in time?
It's horrible. I'll be honest with you. I commentated on the last match in India this year was between Calcutta and Chennai for the final. No crowd allowed. I was in a studio in Mumbai, so I'm used to performing in a studio, like at the golf, as Howard says, we're all in the cabin. We're not actually out on the course. But there was nothing to get hold of. The player scored a goal and there's nobody to run to celebrate. I don't like this idea of cardboard cutouts, especially when fans are paying for them, and putting false sound on. It's just not right. And I find it really hard when you're in such an isolated situation. It's hollow. I'll be honest with you, it's hollow. And I personally would have preferred football to say, right, we're going to wait until the crowd can come in, because it's such a big part of the game.
Well, as we've been on, I know, Clark, if you need to leave, mate, it's been a pleasure. I know you need to leave at 1 o'clock, mate. So we will see you on Friday. We have got a new guest, which I've just got through as well. We've not been able to get the other one. He's not been able to confirm it. So, but I'll see you on Friday, Clark.
Yeah,
and thank you as always,
John. Good to see
Thanks,
you,
Howard.
Fantastic.
John, and you, Howard. Sorry, I've taken up so much time.
John,
All the best.
It's just come through on my phone, John. The Premier League have now gone on to they've agreed, or the teams have all agreed for cuts to happen now within training and things like that. You know, is that the first move for football to be back? Is it, or do you think? What do you think the season should end up being like a little bit now? Do you think it should be the PPG, or do you think it should be played later, or do you think they should be playing behind closed doors?
For me, it would be played later until they're absolutely satisfied that it's safe for every player. It seems weird, doesn't it, that we've got to stand 2 meters apart wherever we are, but you've got a free kick and a wall lines up, and a player can't shake hands even when he's scored a goal. It all seems a bit weird to me at the moment. So, as I say, I would have preferred it if they'd delayed it. I think John Barnes said the same in an article. There is no definitive date for a season to end. We know Christmas Day is on December the 25th and things like that. But why shouldn't the football season end for once in, I don't know, September, if so be it, and then have a month off and reorganise the next season? I would have preferred that, personally. I understand why. It's to do with television, it's to do with money. They want to get completed. I understand the Liverpool situation. I understand why they want the season now. Going back to the contact thing, it's happening in Germany. They're playing the matches. I think they start playing in, is it Norway or Denmark this weekend as well? So, okay, if that's the way it's got to be, that's the way it's got to be. We'll just get through this season and start the new one afresh with a crowd, I hope, though.
Yeah, it is very strange, because I think Jadon Sancho out in Dortmund has been, you know, reprimanded for hugging somebody after a goal. It just feels a bit bizarre if that's the case. I think My concern with the Championship, I know you just touched on Leeds there, but my concern is that there's clubs in the Championship who might not be able to afford to actually test every day to make that jump of, I think they're talking 180 grand plus for that side of it. It's a big outlay for a lot of clubs, and maybe up to £1 million is a big fall in there with no profits coming through. You know, it's just a real difficult situation, John, I think.
Yeah, it is. We know it's a very awkward situation, and you're right. The testing, got to get everything right. In fact, when they find a vaccine, we'll all be a lot happier as well. And I can really understand it for the Bradford Cities of this world. No, you know what they do depend on turnstiles and people coming to watch them. Playing behind a closed door, Bradford City versus Macclesfield is a waste of time.
And for you as a commentator, I was just going to say, did you as a commentator, is there any regulations which they've brought out which may be happening with you guys up in the countries?
No, well, of course, I don't know about the situation when matches are played in this country. I can only relate to the ones in India. And we were in a studio hundreds of miles away from where the game was being played in Goa, of course. And it's horrible. It's just not right. You need to be part of the build-up. You need to be able to talk to people at the ground before a match is played. I would imagine that when we go back here now, supposing it is Leeds United versus Stoke City, which is a game I was going to go to, there'll only be something like 10 or 12 journalists allowed in. They'll have to sit separate, well apart. The gantry's not too bad for a television crew. You can still have a commentator and an assistant. Then you've got your cameraman. You've got to have the cameraman up there as well. So there is a limit to the number of people you've got to have to do the broadcast. But it's all very false to me. It's just all very false, and there's no passion to go with it at all.
Absolutely.
I hate VAR. That's something else. That's another subject.
Just a couple of questions that social media and the quite good ones that I'd like to ask John, if that's all right. John, is there a commentator that, you've worked with some great ones, as we know, but is there a commentator that you particularly really enjoyed working with? And conversely, was there somebody who you actively avoided?
Funny you should say that. Well, as a commentator, you work with an ex-pro. So I've worked with 40 or 50 former professional players, and the one who stood out to me that I really enjoyed working with was Joe Royle. He's a scouse sense of humour, but he's just an absolute top of a guy. He's got funny stories, but he did his homework as well. And so Joe was always a dream to be with. What I liked about Joe as well was it's a big crew. It's a television crew. There are, we're the face of the broadcast. But you've got your cameraman, you've got your sound guys, you've got your clipperboard people. And Joe made sure of talking to everyone, getting to know all the names and buying them all a drink at the end of the day. Terry Butcher was very good in that respect as well. Just great company to be with. Awkward, difficult. One was John Fashanu, who wasn't working with me, full enough. He was working with Clive Tilsley at USA 94. And Clive had sort of paused for John to come in a couple of times, and he'd said nothing. So the third time he made it obvious, he said, "John, what do you think about it?" And John Fashanu wrote on a piece of paper, "I have nothing to say," which is pretty good for a commentator, really, like when he's being paid a few £100 to do the job as well. My experience has been pretty good. There were one or two former players who were, I don't mean retired players, one or two players who were injured at the time and couldn't play in a certain match. It might have been Sheffield Wednesday versus Barnsley or whatever, and there was a player who was injured and came to join me. And of course, he was very, very cautious in what they would say, wouldn't criticise anybody. Not that we're in it to criticise anyone. They're difficult to work with as well. But most of the lads are terrific, they really are.
And Claire says, what's your favourite piece of... We asked this to everybody, actually, John. Obviously, you're in Couzens' gym, but a lot of people are doing these interviews from home, and there's a bookcase behind. We had Will Carling on a few weeks ago, and he had an immaculate bookcase, and we asked him what his favourite book was. and he turned and just said the Viz annual. You know, it was just like it was priceless. But we're going to ask, what's your favourite piece of memorabilia that you've collected throughout your career?
Well, Andy would probably know that only a few weeks ago I was asked to do one of these things whereby you post 10 pictures on 10 consecutive days of meaningful moments in your life. And I finished with a picture of myself interviewing Nelson Mandela. Now, there is a bit of name dropping for you, but, you know, if you talk about, I interviewed Muhammad Ali as well. I've interviewed the Stones and the Beatles. The Stones is a wonderful story that I'd love to tell you, but with Mick Jagger, but it will be off screen. Whereas Nelson Mandela, probably a short interview. But just when you think back in your career, I had the opportunity, and I've got the picture on my wall to prove it, to interview one of the world's greatest men of our lifetime, Mandela. So that's got to be my favourite bit of memory.
What was that?
Yeah, that was the year after sanctions were lifted. And I went over with the Yorkshire County Cricket Club at Martin Moxon's time. And Yorkshire were the first team after the sanctions to play in South Africa. And we were in Cape Town. And some great lads in the Yorkshire team at that time. And I had a guy called Rushdie Majid who said, try and fix Nelson for me. And he did. And I made a mistake of trying to interview Nelson Mandela while he was walking down the road. And he said, not now, not now. And I had to wait until he'd done his rally. And then he came out of a back door. And that's how I got the interview.
Wow. Fancy.
That's incredible.
The other favourite one to work with, by the way, the other funny story is about John Arlott. I mentioned, I don't know if you remember this story, Andy, from when you and I had a chat before. But when I worked in London, I got the opportunity to produce Test Match Special. One of my favourite programmes of all time. And I now was working with my heroes, John Arlott, Brian Johnston. And the match was at Old Trafford, England versus the West Indies. And I got there being very eager, 8 o'clock in the morning for an 11 o'clock start. And John was the first commentator to arrive. And I said, John Helm, we've worked together once before, but anything you want, you've only got to ask. And he said, just get the temperature right. Temperature? He said, we start with the white, then we have the red. Boyle brings the champers about 12:30, and then we have anything that's going, really. And, it was brilliant. And the producer's job at that time, you had to do a rota, and there were certain commentators who didn't get on, so you couldn't put him on with him. You know, you had to be careful. I had to do Fred Truman's autograph. Fred hated signing autographs, so all these books would come in. I've done 1,000 Fred. I can do it to this day, Fred Truman. There you go. And so there were thousands of kids and people running around this country thinking we got Fred Truman's autograph. Well, they haven't really. I had to organise a game of cricket for Christopher Martin Jenkins on the Sunday, because Test matches were played Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Monday, Tuesday in those days. So I used to fix up CMJ with a local game. And there's nothing wrong with this, but dear old Blowers, Henry, I had to fix him up with a lady companion for the Saturday evening for dinner. Nothing untoward, just dinner. He loved female companionship and he liked going out for dinner. So those were my roles. And answering readers' letters. Anyway, it's about 10 to 3 in the afternoon. John Arlott had it in his contract never to work after 3 o'clock. I can't think why. And it's about 10 to 3. He's on his last stint. And I got the headphones on. I thought, John hasn't spoken for about 30 seconds, which is an eternity in rate. I looked across it. John, and he went 43 for 4. Which is amazing because Clive Lloyd was 126 at the time.
Fantastic,
John. Story of my Test match special days.
Fantastic, John. Look, we could talk forever. You know, AJ's a massive sport fan as well, and we love you, John. It's everything you do for us is great. We really do appreciate you spending the time, with us today. There's people out there who will be listening to this and watching it, and we could go for hours, as we know. So we're gonna bring it to an end there. But thank you very much, because we do appreciate time and things like that. We've got to thank Simply Video behind us as well, and as I say, SGH Sporting Events as well. The guys there, you know, talking about Augusta. If you want to go to Augusta, you can get on with these boys. They do a great trip there and stuff like that. You know, it's brilliant. Also, thank you to Simply Video behind us for looking after us. Our guest today, you know, AJ obviously coming in as well. You know, we've got Clarkey as always. And as I say, John, thank you very much for spending the time. We really do appreciate it. You know,
thank you, John. It was great for your stories.
And some great stories in there as well. As I say, we could have gone on for hours. Don't forget, though, guys, you go to the SGH Sporting Events page and just click on the link for the NHS. And if you want to give any money, please do, because, as I say, every penny we've raising is going there. We've had some great memorabilia which we've been sold and been given to sell and things on there. So it's raised about 3,000 or 4,000, I think now we're up to. So it's a great amount which is going into to where we were. We've been doing this for 8 weeks. The Friday one, as I say, that forget the little comment I said earlier on, because that now has changed. We can't get in touch with the guy who we wanted to, or he's not coming back to us, and we can't leave it any longer. So we have got somebody else who is basically a superstar. You know, really is a great talker, motivational talker, but also a Ryder Cupper as well. So we're back onto the golf side of it. We've got Ronnie Whelan tomorrow. He's coming on. We're going to be talking Liverpool, talking about cup finals and the football world again tomorrow. So we've got Ronnie Whelan on tomorrow. We'll be back again at 12 o'clock. So we will see you then. And thank you again for watching and listening. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Thank you, John.
Cheers all. Cheers.
Cheers, John.
Thank you. Pleasure.